Hi everybody and welcome back to B2B NAV and our final podcast of the year. I apologise in advance for my Christmas jumper this week. Obviously we've been launching virtual visitor to the market, bringing brand engagement portals into the marketing mix this year alongside the, myriad of virtual events we've seen spiral out of the decimation of the physical events and exhibitions calendar. And one of the questions we've been asked consistently by clients is, do you have any stats? Do you have any recommendations? How long do people stay in virtual event environments? Give us more information and more kind of tangible evidence to help them make a better informed decision about whether that's something they want to entertain or enter into. Obviously, we've ran a selection of events so far through Virtual Visitor, and they're ongoing throughout this year and early into next year. There's many more to come. But we thought it would take this opportunity for us to share some stats with you. So hopefully give you a bit of guidance in relation to what the findings we found so far, and also maybe how that could shape recommendations or conversation points. So I just want to hand across to Ollie on this one. You can be in the driving seat.
I'm armed
Ollie,
with the stats today.
Over you go.
So the first thing I'll just quickly explain, just in case anybody isn't familiar, when we're talking about virtual events and brand portals, the way the clients have been using them so far is that they've not been like a 1 hour event. These have typically been kind of multi-day events, and they've spanned sometimes half a day, sometimes entire days. So we are talking about longer events, more akin to what you'd have traditionally got in the physical world, as opposed to the kind of one-off webinars that you were previously used to seeing online. So with that being said, the first stat that I'd like to kick off with is just around attendance. So what we've seen so far is, of the people invited, around 50% of people have attended.
Okay.
You're never going to get 100% attendance, and I think that applies in real life too. For context, the typical number that we see for a webinar attendance rate is around 25 to 35%.
Okay, so we're seeing an uplift against the classic kind of webinar statistics, but still quite a significant drop-off, I guess, really, is the honest way of looking at it. So,
but I think anybody running any kind of event, whether it's physical or digital, you have to be aware that people will commit to things further out, and then as you're busy and you get closer to the time, you can't always attend what you thought you were going to attend. Things crop up last minute.
How have you found that from a client kind of acceptance point of view? Do you think they accept that's going to happen, or are they disappointed in the sense of, because I know I've heard some clients get quite excited about the number of registrants that they've got onto the landing pages and the amplification campaigns around it. So is that a stat that they're willing to take on at the minute, if you know what I mean? So is it something they're worried about? Or?
I think it's a bit of both, and it depends here, because I think you can look at the absolute figure. And let's say, for example, you have 100 people in an event, you might go like, oh, we were hoping for, we saw an invite list of 250, we thought we were going to have more. But then you look at it, like I say, in comparison to what you would have got for a webinar, and you're seeing a 50% attendance rate, and that is a good stat. Should we settle for that, or should we see if we can get it higher? Of course, we'll see if we can get it higher. And the things you can do to try and drive that higher, like make sure you've got continuous engagement throughout the journey leading up to an event, so that people are interested. You're kind of whetting people's appetites, and also making sure that you actually are putting on a good show, so that people want to attend it. But also then during the event, doing things like sending notifications out to people to make sure that they are aware that there is currently something going on. So let's say it's a half-day event that started at 9 a.m. If at 9 a.m. I've got a critical meeting I need to jump into instead, maybe I'm done by 10. But if you don't remind me to go back, you might have lost me for the day. And whereas if I get a reminder at 10:30 to say, hey, that session you said you were going to be really interested in is starting soon, would you like to join? There's a good chance I'm going to get back in there and join.
Do you think in the virtual space it's also quality over quantity? Because I think there's this transition, this hybrid period at the minute where people have come from physical events and exhibitions, and that's their mindset, when they've got thousands of people coming to the stand, high footfall rates, or hopefully high footfall rates, not necessarily great engagement, by the way, but a lot of people passing through, a lot of badge scans, a lot of data capture towards the virtual event.
I'd say that's definitely true. I mean, if you think about events that you've attended, I'm sure you've attended somewhere you go to a session and it sounds like it's going to be good, and they're really not in some cases.
Sure.
But you're there. So what are you going to do? Are you just going to wander around an event floor, or just leave the event, or do you just sit and stick it out? And I guess there'll be a mix. But in the digital world, you're definitely just going to shut the whole thing down and say
close the webcam and get on with the rest of the day.
So I think definitely focusing on having quality key sessions instead of having lots of sessions is probably more important there.
And I think one of the things that's interesting, this isn't a sales pitch about Virtual Visitor, but it's worth mentioning, because if you are doing a straight webinar, okay, you've got your recording that you can potentially drive people back to, but with the Virtual Visitor being a perpetual presence, those that aren't or can't attend on that day, maybe something's come up, maybe they forgot, maybe they've slipped out of the net, but the ability to remarket to those individuals, and with it being left on as that perpetual presence to invite people and draw traffic back to, so there's never really a lost opportunity in that sense. So,
which ties me to my next stat, which is for one of the recent events that we put on for a client, we saw that around 60% of visitors attended one of the live sessions live.
Right, okay.
Which, I mean, I think you could look at that and say, oh, we were hoping that everybody that joined on the day would go and watch the live session. But people are joining late. People don't necessarily want to go and see a live session, and there's more to do in there than just watch the live sessions. But I think a key point is that figure doesn't include people that are watching recordings.
Okay.
So going back to your point there, I think you will see that figure go higher, and as you have people watching recordings, and particularly over time as you can remarket to them and drive them back to it to go and watch recordings that they've missed. Yeah,
and I think again, probably in terms of those live sessions, that's one part of the platform that we built, the solution that we built obviously is one part of that. So I guess some people will come because they're interested in that thought leadership content, that live engagement and the experts that they're hearing speak on the day. Others might not be coming for that. They might be coming to engage with the products or services or the concepts or meetings. So I guess in our environment, that's a bit different, I guess, potentially. Albeit I still think it's a good stat to have referenced for sure. Yeah, so I was describing it when we were having a conversation offline yesterday as similar to a shopping mall having an anchor store. So that key shop that you use to try and drive people to go to the shopping centre, which helps bring traffic and footfall to all the other shops. Yeah. And it's potentially a bit similar here, is that you can have a key webinar or session or panel, whatever it might be, that can help bring people to the environment. But then when they're there, they can go and explore, learn all about your brand, your product portfolio, key innovations, trends, whatever it might be that you're trying to communicate. Okay, so there's more to it. Sounds good. And I think coming back to the point around kind of focusing your message and having key things to focus on, for one of our clients, we found that one of the products that they were emphasizing got 3 times more engagement than everything else. Okay. And I think for me that just shows that there's real rationale in there, not to just throw everything that you could possibly throw at the environment. So if you've got 500 products in your portfolio, don't try and include them all. Focus on the ones that people are most likely to be interested in at the moment. Focus on the ones that you need to be pushing. Focus on the ones that are on trend. And without going into lots of detail about this specific client, I'm curious now, you piqued my interest. Was there a reason why that content, concept, prototype, machine, whatever it was in this case, actually, was it more prevalent, more easily identifiable within the platform, or was it just was it linked to a trend or a topic, or a bit of both? So it within the actual kind of show area, let's say, it got equal kind of prominence with everything else. Okay. It did also have presence within some of the theatre sessions. Okay. And likewise, within the environment, we had a tasting table. It was one of the items that appeared on the tasting table. Okay. However, the other item that appeared on the tasting table, and therefore also had equal prominence, didn't get the same level of traction. Okay. So I think it shows that this particular concept, in this case, had more traction with the audience at the time. But sure, this is where I think the gold dust comes in, and the insights and the information, because actually to know that, because at a physical exhibition or event or many other things, you have no idea what works and what content's working and what isn't working, how you can optimize the experience going forward. But if you can literally rank your concepts in the sense of which one's got more traction, which ones are more relevant, then surely that leads to better sales follow-up conversations, more meaningful and more meaningful ROI ultimately, I guess, in terms of what is working and what isn't. And that's probably a key point which I don't have a stat for, but when I was talking about engagement with products and concepts there, I'm not talking about somebody having looked at it. I'm talking about demonstration requests and contact with the technical team requests effectively. So we're seeing, compared to a webinar, genuine sales follow-up coming off the back of this. Fantastic. Which you would get with a physical event, but you don't typically get with a webinar, where it's much more informational, kind of one-way thought leadership, as opposed to, I want to learn more about your product right now. We won't have any stats on this yet, because it's too big a question, I guess. What I'm really interested to see is to compare those tangible sales leads that you do get on the fly through a virtual event versus the physical event. Yeah. Because I think that you do get the passing traffic, and you get a lot of pre-organised meetings and so on at physical events. But I suspect that slowly the virtual offering will start to produce more goods, because I think people are more likely to they're protected a little bit by the anonymity of being on the platform. I know we know who they are because they're registered, but they don't actually have to have the bravery to, one, go on the stand, secondly, to actually engage with a real human being. And people don't like doing this at exhibitions. It's a known fact. So in the sense of the fact they can go on and request a sample privately and it can get sorted out in the background, I think is something that you're going to see more and more of, and I think it could lead to more sales opportunities ultimately, which is great to see.
And just from our point of view with our platform, obviously, is whether they actually click that request a product demo or not, we still know who's looked at each concept or product or whatever it might be. So you do have that information to follow up, even if somebody hasn't specifically requested.
Well, I think it's a good point, isn't it? Because you've still got the opportunity, therefore, to say we know you engaged with it, we know you viewed it. Would you like to see it? Maybe you forgot to click the button, or obviously
it depends on where you believe people are in your purchase funnel and how much time you have to follow up with everything. But the opportunities there. I suppose this one's quite to be expected, but just in case it's not for anybody, attendance and engagement is much higher amongst your existing audiences than amongst new audiences. So we've found that, for example, around 2/3 of existing audiences that were invited viewed at least one live session, whereas I think the number was closer to 50-50 for a new audience. And by a new audience here, I mean an audience that is driven by things like social media marketing campaigns, potentially haven't ever engaged with that company before, but liked the sound of the event and registered for the event. But then when it came to it, not as many that attended were as engaged, possibly having a bit more of a look around as opposed to...
I think there's also a link here into the way the events have been amplified and promoted, though, because I think if you've got your existing client base going in contacts and customers and people that know you and trust you and like you and all the classic sales language, they will go. Because you're putting on an event for them, and it's probably to enhance the value-added services that you offer. I think to a cold prospect at the minute, to cut through the noise and the digital noise around virtual events, because every man and his dog is putting on a webinar, and I think there's this skeptical kind of reticence now towards webinars. That you're like, another webinar, another hour sat looking at a blank PowerPoint screen with no engagement. And that isn't what virtual visitor is, and I think it isn't where the virtual space is going to go, obviously. But how do you amplify that, and how do you educate cold prospects that it isn't just another webinar without saying it as crass as that? Which maybe that's what we should do.
And I think the other point to mention there again is that while in this case 50% didn't attend a live session, or just shy of 50% didn't attend a live session, they're still registered. We still have the details. We can still follow up. They still browse the environment, so there is still meaningful contact and learning that is happening. And
you've got the ability to remarket, retarget, pull them back in.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
I think this is one that will be really interesting to clients, because I think whenever we've been talking to them about virtual events, this is one of their key questions, and that's that visitors were willing to attend more than one live session. Because I think that was a big concern around, if you think about a traditional webinar, people didn't generally do multiple webinars in a day. You do one a month, if that. Whereas we found that, certainly for one of our events, that visitors were attending an average of 4 sessions.
Wow, okay.
The only caveat I'll say to that is that there were some very short sessions in there as well. So there were a couple of 5-minute sessions that could be included in that. This is just an average figure. But it still shows that people were willing to attend some of the lengthy sessions, and multiple times in a day over the course of an event. Whereas, again, coming back to the previous point, obviously there's a bit of a difference there between existing audiences and new audiences. New audiences being less likely to join multiple sessions, so the average for a new audience was 3 sessions. But either way, still multiple sessions.
I think it's an interesting debate, again, at the minute in terms of the changing tides of the industry and the space, in the sense of a lot of clients, particularly in the B2B space, naturally gravitate towards the physical events. Physical events are on for a week at times. I think I'm thinking back to K-Show over in Dusseldorf. Literally a full week. So when they're putting on the virtual events, the tendency is to go at least like 3 days. And I'm thinking, like, are you separating the audience groups, which they are quite often, into different days with different targets and different focuses, or is it an open access kind of platform route you can go down? But the expectation that people will be in the platform all day, I think we've got to move away from. And I think we're trying to encourage clients to think in more punchy, more high value sessions.
And I think in general they have been so far. So we've often had multiple sessions per day, but what no client has tried to do so far is have a packed agenda all day. So it'll be like either a half day's event or a few events spread, live sessions spread throughout the day. So I think a key thing, it's a key takeaway, is just be time conscious and think about you're not going to have somebody sat at home for 7 hours a day staring at your presentations all day. They need to get along with whatever other work might be going on in the meantime, because they're still on the computer and they've still got their Outlook notifications pinging up.
Sure. Okay. Sounds good.
And then the last stat that I have prepared to throw at you at the moment is that around 36% of visitors are engaging either with chat or chatbots.
Well, this is a big debate, isn't it? We've had this on most of the platforms and solutions that we've built so far for people, but it's an interesting one. So, is your gut feel there that's higher than you thought it would be?
I think it's probably around where I'd expect it to be honest.
Okay.
But
so you're not an expert in your field, though. I think.
I'm not saying I'm going to bang on.
But I think more for a layman, you sort of think the chatbot people. I think we've gone through a journey here at BDB over the last couple of years from chatbot kind of apathy of chatbots. Nobody wants to engage with them. Do you think that's anything to do with the pandemic, in the sense of the digital transformation that people have been forced to get used to?
Potentially to some extent. I mean, if nothing else, customer service lines, if you've had any problem in the last sort of 6 to 9 months, at least in the UK, customer service lines have been a nightmare, and you're often directed towards live chat and chatbots and things like that. But I think that's becoming the norm anyway. I think as a society, we're getting used to engaging with chat as a way to get our problems solved. Yeah. And I think we're seeing that again with B2B and within that virtual event and brand engagement portal sort of space, is that people are willing to engage in it. And one of the things that I love seeing is, even when we have a message that to me is clearly from a bot, I don't know if everybody else feels the same way, maybe it isn't to them, but people are typing thank you back to the bot. So it's either they don't realise that it's a bot, or they've got this common courtesy thing built in. So we have triggered messages in the environment that say things like, "Oh, if you want to explore, just click on the plus symbol and you'll enter this space." Or if somebody spends too long on the screen, it'll pop up and say, "Can we help you find what you're looking for?" Just click here, and it'll pop up basically a decision tree of things that you can click on. But people are engaging really well with those. Yeah. But also, I don't want to diminish live chat. Is that people have been engaging really well with the live chat. So we've seen a lot of genuine kind of queries and sales conversations happening within the live chat, which I think just shows that people are willing to use that as a route to find things out, and then you can obviously schedule follow-up conversations.
Well, I think linked to that, I was going to say, is kind of the meeting space, which we're not going to have stats on today, but in the sense of obviously as part of the solution and virtual visitor, that there's the ability to book a meeting, have a drop-in meeting, book a meeting in advance, schedule follow-up meetings, you name it, it's all in there. Albeit we're seeing more uptake of the actual live chat interactions and engagement than actually wanting that face-to-face interaction on the day. And
again, just to be clear, when we say a meeting, it's basically a live video call that takes place in the environment. You pick a time at some point during the day, a 15 or a 30-minute slot, whatever the client chooses to set up the environment to have, and you can have that conversation with a representative, very similar to what you would in a physical event. But as you say, there's a little bit of reticence around that we're seeing, and it might just be that people are in that safe zone. I'm at home and I don't want to join a video call with somebody.
Honestly, I think it's a psychology point. I'm convinced it's linked to the anonymity of not knowing who you're meeting. I think this is a point we've got to work through with our clients and work through on future projects. I think if you have a named person in the room and they're known either through profile, existing contacts, they're a part of the team or the sales team or the customer service team or whoever it is, people would be more willing to drop into the room. I think because it's would you like to come to this room for a meeting with an expert, and there's kind of this anonymity around it, I don't think many people would want to do that. And I also think that's exactly the same on a physical exhibition stand. People go to meet contacts, they go to meet people that they know, they don't go for a speculative meeting. And I haven't got any stats on it, but maybe we can try and find some for a future podcast. But I do think it's that anonymity point that people are protected, as you say, behind the screen, the live chat, they're getting the answers that they want as well. They're getting they can request the details that they want, they request the follow-ups through the call to actions. But I'm convinced it's linked to that. So I think the longer this goes on, I think people will always want the ability to offer a meeting. Yeah.
Well, I think that's actually a really interesting point, because one of the other things that we just did with one of our recent events is that on some days of the event, we offered that functionality to book a live meeting. But for certain regions, the client in question didn't want that to be an option. So instead of actually allowing the visitor to select a specific time and date from the calendar, we just allowed them to request a meeting, and that fired a request off to the client to pick up with separately. And it looks like that's got quite well engaged with.
And that went straight through to Salesforce, Pardot, whatever it may be. In terms of the
So
CRM.
they'll pick up that as part of their normal process, the same way they would a form being filled in on the website to find out more information. But yeah, it looks like that's got better engagement than actually booking a meeting in the environment. So that might be, again, something to explore, where maybe, again, at the minute we're hypothesizing because it's quite new, I suppose, but maybe it's that situation of, I don't want to meet now. I've got other things in my head. I'm not mentally prepared for it, but I'm willing to acknowledge that I might have a meeting at some point in the next few weeks. So
but it's still,
please contact me about that.
It's still a great result to see those interactions coming through, though, for sure. Awesome. That's really good, really useful, really interesting. Hopefully everybody else found those stats and insights useful as well. Obviously the virtual events and the brand engagement portal space is new to everybody, so it's an area that we're all continuing to learn and develop and evolve on for the meantime. So no doubt we'll come back to you with more stats and more information as we're learning more with the events, to hopefully inform you to make better decisions going forward about you incorporating them into your marketing communications mix. So thanks very much. That's our last one for the year. Wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we'll see you in 2021. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.